Picture the most romantic moment in British history. The young queen and her handsome German prince married at last, arriving at Windsor Castle for their honeymoon. Roses, candlelight, music drifting through gilded corridors. Now fill that picture with what it actually took to make it happen. Add 600 fireplaces that had to be cleaned before dawn by children with bleeding knuckles. Add chamber pots carried down back staircases by women who were forbidden to be seen carrying them. Add a castle so cold in February that the water froze in the servants' basins. So vast that footmen wore out a pair of shoes every 6 weeks just walking its corridors. And so strictly ruled that a housemaid could be dismissed without a reference for the crime of being looked at by the Queen. That's Windsor Castle in 1840, the most famous honeymoon in the world, and underneath it, an army of invisible people running on 4 hours of sleep, terrified of making a sound. We're going back there tonight, not as guests at the wedding breakfast, not as historians reading Victoria's diary. We're going below stairs, into the cold corridors and the coal cellars and the candle rooms. One person, 3 days, everything she would have seen, smelled, carried and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who enjoy hearing about frozen wash basins and the secret staircases of dead kings. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. Here is the problem with your life, and you have exactly 1 day to solve it. Tomorrow evening, the Queen of England arrives at this castle with her new husband, and by then, the fire in her private sitting room must burn perfectly, silently, invisibly, lit by hands she will never see, tended by a person she must never meet. That person is you. And this morning, you burned your right hand on a grate and it hasn't stopped shaking since. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Cold candle tallow, sheep fat and smoke from the stub you blew out 6 hours ago. Damp stone, the smell of a 900-year-old wall sweating through February. Coal dust, worked so deep into the floorboards and the blankets and your own skin that you don't know anymore whether the room smells of coal or you do. Somewhere below, faintly, yesterday's boiled mutton still hanging in the back stairs like a ghost. And underneath it all, the smell of 8 women sleeping in one attic room. Wet wool, old sweat, breath, including yours. Welcome to Windsor Castle, in the second week of February 1840. You're lying on a straw mattress in the maid's dormitory, high in the roof above the kitchen court, on the east side of the biggest inhabited castle in the world. Above you, slates and sky. Below you, more than 900 rooms, most of which you will never enter, and 3 miles of corridors, most of which you have already scrubbed on your knees. Your name is Hannah Price. You're 17 years old, and you arrived here 14 months ago from a village in Berkshire with exactly 1 spare dress, a Bible you can read about half of, and a letter from the rector saying you were honest and strong. Back home, everyone said Windsor would be the making of you. They weren't wrong, they just didn't say what it would cost. Somewhere below a clock strikes, then another, slightly behind it, and another behind that. The castle is full of clocks and none of them agree. But the one that matters, the one in the housekeeper's corridor, says the same thing every morning. 5 o'clock, time to move. Your hand throbs before you're even upright. Yesterday, cleaning the grate in the crimson drawing room, You gripped an iron bar that some fool had left near the embers. The burn runs across 3 fingers of your right hand, a tight, angry line, the skin already hard and weeping at the edges. You wrapped it in a strip of linen with goose grease underneath, the way your mother taught you. It will heal. It always heals. But today, of all days, your hand needs to be quick and quiet and perfect, and instead it feels like it belongs to someone else. You do not say a word about it. A maid who cannot work is a maid who can be replaced. There are girls in Windsor town, and in every village for 20 miles, who would take your bed, your wages, and your name in the housekeeper's book before your box was even packed. £10 a year, your food, your candles, your tea and sugar found. Girls have walked from Wales for less. The floor is ice under your bare feet. Literal ice. There's a skin of it on the water in the basin by the window, thin as glass, and you crack it with your left fist, the good hand, and splash your face before your body can argue. The cold goes through you like a nail. Your breath hangs in the air of the room, and you can see it even in the dark, a grey shape, there and gone. Around you, the others are rising. Nobody talks. Sarah, who shares your mattress, is already lacing her stays, fingers moving fast, eyes still shut. Talking wastes heat. Talking wastes time. And in this castle, on this particular morning, time is the only thing more precious than coal. Because today the whole world is watching London, where at 1 o'clock this afternoon, in the Chapel Royal at St. James's, Queen Victoria, 20 years old, 4 foot 11 inches tall, ruler of the largest empire on earth, will marry Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. And tomorrow, no, you've heard the corrections flying down the corridors all week. Not tomorrow, tonight. This very evening the married couple will climb into a carriage and drive the 21 miles from London to Windsor through the February dark, and when they arrive, this castle must be warm, lit, fed, staffed, silent, and flawless. 21 miles, 4 hours by carriage, maybe less if the roads hold, which means that from the moment the guns fire in London to tell the world the ring is on her finger, you and every other servant in this building will be running a race against a coach and 4. You dress in the dark, rough linen shift, cold as a dead man's handshake. Stays laced left-handed today badly, the burn screaming when you forget and use your right. Grey wool dress, the working one, the one with the hem already black from grates no amount of brushing will fix. Coarse apron, and then the item that matters most, your cap. White, plain, starched. In this castle, a crooked cap is read like a crooked soul. Mrs. Gardner, the housekeeper, has sent girls back upstairs to repin a cap while a duchess waited for her fire. Appearances matter in this castle. They matter more than warmth, more than sleep, sometimes more than sense. Down the attic stairs, 62 steps, wooden, then stone, and you know every one of them the way you know your own teeth. Which ones creak? Which ones are worn hollow in the middle? Which one, the 14th from the bottom, is a half-inch shorter than the rest and has turned more ankles than a frozen pond? You go down in the dark with one shoulder brushing the wall because candles are counted, and no maid burns one just to walk a staircase she can walk blind. And as you descend, the castle wakes around you. You can hear it. Not voices. It's too early for voices. But the building itself. The dry crackle of the first fires being coaxed alive in the kitchen 3 floors down. The scrape of ash shovels on the stone. The dull boom of a coal cellar door. Water being pumped somewhere. A rhythmic iron squeal. A castle this size doesn't wake like a house. It wakes like a ship or an animal, section by section, deep sounds first, moving upward toward the light. By 5:30, you're in the housekeeper's corridor with your housemaid's box in your left hand. The wooden carrier with the brushes, the black lead, the emery paper, the tinder, the cloths, and the weight of it drags at your shoulder. 11 pounds at least, and today you will carry it up and down more staircases than you can count. Mrs. Gardner is waiting. She's a broad, still woman of about 50, in black silk that whispers when she moves, with a chatelaine of keys at her waist that would ransom a farm. She's been at Windsor since before the old king died, since before the king before that died, and she can look at a polished table from across a room and tell you which corner the maid skipped. She looks at your hands. Of course she looks at your hands. She looks at everyone's hands. What's that? It is not a question, and you have learned not to treat it as one. A burn, Mrs. Gardner, from the crimson room grate. It won't slow me. A long moment. Her eyes go from the bandage to your face and back. Somewhere down the corridor a clock ticks with the patience of something that has watched 100 girls stand exactly where you are standing. See that it doesn't, she says. You have the Queen's private apartments today. The sitting room and the dressing room. Fires laid by 3, lit by 5, burning sweet by 7. If Her Majesty walks into a room tonight and smells smoke, girl, she will not complain to you. She will not even see you. She will say one word to the Baroness, and the Baroness will say one word to me, and you will be walking to Berkshire in the rain by Friday. Yes, Mrs. Gardner. And Hannah. She's already turning away, already reaching for the next name on the next list. If you meet any member of the royal family in a corridor, if you so much as hear them coming, you turn your face to the wall and you stop breathing until they're gone. Tonight of all nights, they are not to see us. That is the whole art of this house. A castle that runs itself as far as they can tell. Magic. Her mouth does something that on another face might be a smile. We are the magic. Go. Go. As if it were simple, as if the Queen's private apartments were down the passage instead of a quarter of a mile away, through a building the size of a town. Let me tell you about Windsor Castle, because until you have carried a loaded housemaid's box through it before dawn, you do not know what the word big means. The castle covers 13 acres. 13 acres of stone, most of it piled up over 8 centuries by kings who each looked at what the last king built and decided it wasn't enough. William the Conqueror started it in about 1070 as a wooden fort on a chalk hill above the Thames. Henry II rebuilt it in stone. Edward III poured a fortune into it in the 1350s, £50,000, the most any English king had ever spent on a single building, because he wanted a castle worthy of his new order of knights, the Garter. And then, just 20 years before this morning, George IV hired an architect named Geoffrey Wyatville and spent the modern equivalent of a nation's ransom. Parliament voted £300,000 and he blew through it and kept going, raising the round tower 30 feet higher so it would look better from a distance, punching a great new corridor along 2 sides of the quadrangle, Gothicking every window until the whole thing looked the way a castle looks in a dream. That grand corridor alone is 550 feet long. You know, because you have polished it, on your knees, backwards, a yard at a time, beeswax and turpentine, the smell of it living in your hands for days. 550 feet is longer than the whole street you grew up on. And here is the thing nobody tells you about a building like this. It is at war with the season, always, and in February the season is winning. Stone holds cold the way a miser holds coin. The staterooms with their fires roaring can be brought up to something like comfort, but the corridors between them, the servants' passages, the back stairs, the underground tunnel that runs beneath the quadrangle, so that food and coal and maids can cross the castle without profaning the view, those are cold as a well. You move between climates in this building. Fire warm, stone cold, fire warm, stone cold, and your body never settles, and half the household has a cough from October to April, and nobody has ever once suggested doing anything about it, because this is how it has always been. You go down into the tunnel now because it's the fastest way east. The passage is low and lamplit. The oil lamps hung every few yards, giving off their fishy, mineral smell, and the traffic is already heavy. A boy with a sack of coal bent almost double under it. 2 kitchen maids with covered trays. A man from the confectionery carrying, with the tenderness of a father carrying an infant, a basket of spun sugar work for tonight's table. Everyone moving fast, nobody colliding, because there are rules even here. You keep left, you give way to anything hot, anything heavy, and anything belonging to the table of the Queen. The sound down here is its own world. Boots on stone, muffled and multiplied. The creak of basket handles. Somewhere ahead, the kitchen. And you hear the kitchen before you smell it and smell it before you see it. The great kitchen at Windsor has been cooking without interruption for something like 500 years. It is a cathedral of food. A roof of timber lanterns high overhead, walls hung with copper. 500 pieces of copper, pots and moulds and fish kettles, everyone stamped with the royal cipher, everyone scoured after use with sand and vinegar and lemon until it glows like a church candle. This morning it is an inferno, every range lit. The smell rolls out into the passage and hits you like a wall. Roasting fowl, baking bread, stock that has been whispering since yesterday, burnt sugar, hot fat, and under it all the sharp, clean sting of scoured copper. Tonight's dinner is being built in there right now, for a bride and groom who have not yet said their vows. Nothing about that strikes anyone as strange. The food must be ready. The food will be ready. If the wedding was somehow called off, if the world ended at noon, the soup, you suspect, would still go up at 8. You climb out of the tunnel by the eastern stair and the cold of the upper corridors closes over you again, and now you're in the part of the castle that matters today. The private apartments, the east and north fronts, looking out over the terrace and the slopes, and this morning a world of white. Frost on the grass all the way down to the river, mist standing in the park among the oaks, the whole of Berkshire holding its breath. 2 rooms are yours, the Queen's sitting room, the Queen's dressing room. Tonight, after the longest journey of her life, the most famous woman in the world will walk into these rooms with her husband of 10 hours, and everything her eye falls on will be something a servant touched. The trick, the whole art, as Mrs. Gardner says, is that it must look as if no one touched anything at all, as if the fire lit itself, as if the castle loves her personally. You start with the grate, because you always start with the grate. Down on your knees on the hearth cloth. You lay the cloth first, always. A maid who lets ash touch a carpet in this castle might as well pack her box that same hour. The fire from yesterday is dead, but the grate is filthy, and you rake the ash and cinders into the pail with the short iron rake, working left-handed, slow, wrong. Your burned fingers curled uselessly against your palm. The ash rises anyway. It always rises. Fine grey dust that finds your throat and the corners of your eyes, that settles in your eyebrows and turns them old. Then the black lead. This is the part they never put in the pictures of castle life. Every iron grate in every fine room must shine like wet silk, and the shine comes from graphite paste, brushed on, brushed off, buffed. 3 brushes, 20 minutes a grate, and it gets everywhere. Into the whorls of your fingertips, under your nails, into the lines of your knuckles, until your hands are a working woman's hands, grey-black in the creases, and no amount of Sunday scrubbing ever quite gets them clean. Ladies wear gloves. Now you know one reason maids wish they could. You lay the fire the way the head housemaid taught you your first week, and she watched you do it 11 times before she let you do it alone. Cinders saved from yesterday at the bottom, because the board of green cloth counts the coal and waste is a sin against the ledger. Then paper twisted tight, then kindling split pine, laid crosswise with air between the sticks, because a fire breathes or it dies. Then coal, the good coal, the best Wallsend sea coal brought by ship from Newcastle, and by barge up the Thames, each lump chosen by hand and placed, not dumped, placed like masonry, small at the centre, larger without, so that when the match goes in at 5 o'clock this evening, the flame will climb through the structure like a bell ringer climbing a tower, and by 7 the room will be warm as June, and the fire will burn what the housekeeper calls sweet, bright, steady, silent, no spit, no smoke, no smell. That is the plan. Your right hand shakes as you place the last lump, and you steady it with your left, and you kneel there a moment on the cold hearth of the Queen of England's sitting room, and you allow yourself one breath that is entirely your own. The room around you in the grey creeping light is not what you expected a queen's room to be, back when you expected things. It is grand, yes. Silk on the walls, a carpet your whole family could have lived on, porcelain on the chimney-piece worth more than your father earned in his life. But it is also, unmistakably, the room of a 20-year-old girl. There is sheet music on the piano marked in pencil. There are novels. There is a work basket. There are little portraits everywhere, and dogs, china dogs, painted dogs, because the Queen loves her spaniel Dash, the way other people love their children, and everyone below stairs knows it, because Dash has been down to the kitchen and been fed by half the staff, and is, in the private opinion of the household, the most sensible member of the royal family. And on the writing table, laid out square by some other invisible hand, pens, ink and paper, because tonight, whatever else happens, the Queen will write. She writes every day of her life, this Queen. Her journal. Thousands of words in a fast, strong hand. And tomorrow morning she will sit at that table and write about this night, and what she writes, though you will never read it, though it will be years before anyone reads it, will become one of the most quoted diary entries in the history of England. She will write that she never, never spent such an evening, that his excessive love and affection gave her feelings of heavenly love and happiness she never could have hoped to have felt before. She will write that at a table you dusted, by the light of a fire you built, in a room you crossed 40 times on your knees. Nobody will ever know your name. That is not a tragedy this morning. This morning, it is the job. But hold on to that thought, because tonight, for about 4 seconds in a dark corridor, it is going to stop being an idea and become the most important rule of your life. But that's tonight. First you have to get through the day, and the day is a machine with 1,000 moving parts, and you are one of the smallest. By 8 o'clock you've laid both fires, dusted both rooms, top to bottom, always top to bottom, cornice to skirting, because dust falls and only a fool chases it upward. And you're back in the servants' hall for breakfast, and the servants' hall this morning is like a fair the night before a battle. Understand the scale of what you belong to. The royal household at this moment employs somewhere in the region of 1,000 people, counting everyone from the Lord Steward down to the boy who winds the clocks. And there really is a man whose position involves the clocks, just as there is a mole taker for the parks and a rat killer, and men whose entire inherited function no one can quite explain. Here at Windsor, feeding the household is an industry in itself. On a heavy day, this castle serves dinner to hundreds below stairs before a single dish goes up above them. The servants' hall gets through beef and bread and beer in quantities that would frighten a garrison. And it needs to, because the work is bodily, all of it. Hauling and scrubbing and carrying and standing, 14, 16, on a day like today, maybe 18 hours of it. You get bread, butter, and tea, hot and stewed and strong enough to trot a mouse across, and you fold your cold hands around the mug and let the heat soak into them, and around you the hall roars with the one subject there is, the wedding. London. Her. Reigning in London, says a footman, with the authority of a man whose brother-in-law drives a coach on the Bath Road. Raining since dawn. They're calling it the worst February in memory. Rain's lucky for a bride, says one of the laundry maids. Rain's wet for a bride, says the footman. And someone asks the question everyone asks, which is what he's like. The prince, the German boy, Albert, and everyone has an answer, and nobody knows anything. He's handsome. That much is agreed. That much even the newspapers agree on, though the newspapers agree on little else. He's poor. Poor for a prince. His whole duchy smaller than an English county. He's clever, they say, plays the organ, gets up early, doesn't gamble, doesn't drink to speak of, goes to bed at a sensible hour. Half the hall finds this reassuring. The other half finds it deeply suspicious. An Englishman, offers the coal porter, would at least have the decency to have a vice. What nobody says out loud, but everybody knows, is that the country has not been kind about this marriage. Parliament cut the prince's allowance, voted him 30,000 a year when the Queen's uncle got 50 for marrying into the family. They refused him precedence. They sang street ballads about the penniless German come to marry the richest girl in the world. He's arriving in a country that has already decided to make him prove himself, and he is 20 years old, and yesterday he landed at Dover after a channel crossing so vicious that he came ashore green and shaking with the crowd cheering at him. And if any of that has broken his composure, no one has seen it. 20 years old. Both of them. The Queen and her prince. The same age as the girls sitting either side of you at this scrubbed deal table. You think about that sometimes. You will think about it again tonight. Guns, says the steward's room boy suddenly, cocking his head, and the whole hall goes still for a heartbeat. But it's nothing. A door, a cart in the yard. Not yet. When it happens, when the ring goes on in London, the Park and Tower guns will fire, and the church bells of every parish between here and the coast will take it up, and long before any messenger can ride it, Windsor will know. Sound travels faster than horses. That's the telegraph of this world. Bells, guns and beacons, the same system that carried the Armada news still working, still the fastest thing there is. Mrs. Gardiner appears in the doorway of the hall, and the roar drops to a murmur, and the murmur drops to nothing. She doesn't raise her voice. She never raises her voice. She has learned what all powerful people in this castle have learned, which is that a quiet voice makes everyone else do the work of listening. Her Majesty and His Royal Highness leave the palace at 4. They'll be at our doors by 7, 1/2 at the latest. Between now and then, this house will be made perfect. Not good, not near enough. Perfect. There will be no running in the corridors above ground, no voices above a whisper on the principal floors, and no person above stairs after 6 o'clock who has not a written duty to be there. Her eye moves over the hall like a lantern beam. Most of you will not see them arrive. That is correct. That is how it should be. You'll hear the cheering from the town, and you'll know your work is walking through the door. That is your share of it. Now. And the hall empties like a pail with the bottom knocked out. The morning becomes hours you will never entirely remember, because they happen too fast and too heavy. You carry coal, scuttle after scuttle, up the back stairs, 20 pounds a time, the wire handle biting through the folded cloth into your good hand, your shoulder joint burning by the 10th trip, and you learn again the servant's arithmetic that no one above stairs ever does. A fire is not a fire. A fire is coal, and coal is weight, and weight is somebody's spine. 600 fireplaces in this castle, not all lit. Never all lit, but tonight more than anyone can remember. The staterooms, the corridors, the guest rooms for the suite, the private apartments, fires in rooms no one will enter, because a cold room breathes cold into the room beside it, and tonight no draught in this castle is permitted to touch the Queen. You polish. You sweep the grand corridor's carpet with damp tea leaves scattered ahead of the brush to lay the dust. Used leaves, saved from the servant's pot, because everything here is used twice. The dripping from the roast is sold. The candle ends are a footman's perquisite. The very ash you raked this morning goes to the gardens. You climb the small ladder and take down yesterday's candles from a chandelier and set in new ones. Wax. Real wax. Because tallow is for the likes of you, and wax is for the light that touches royal faces. And the difference between them is the difference between a smell you stop noticing and no smell at all. And at some point in the middle of it, you're on the ladder, arms above your head, wax candle in your burned hand. The light through the tall windows changes. The mist over the park has thinned, and you look out, because you cannot help it, at the long walk, the great avenue of elms running dead straight from the castle gate southward, almost 3 miles to the crown of Snow Hill, planted by Charles II 160 years before you were born, each tree older than any person who has ever spoken to you. Tonight the carriage will come up that avenue in the dark between these trees, toward the one-lit castle on its chalk hill, and even the coldest heart below stairs, even the coal porter with his opinions about German virtue, is planning to find a window. You climb down, you move the ladder, you climb up. There are 200 more candles. Your feet, inside your boots, have stopped being feet and become information. Pressure, heat, the specific ache of stone floors that no leather ever softens. The burn on your hand has settled into a deep, patient throb that keeps time with your heart. You notice, the way you notice weather, that you are tired to the bone, and you notice the way you notice weather, that it does not matter. There is a rhythm below fatigue, a place where the body goes on without asking you, hands working, knees bending, and you have lived in that place since before dawn, and you will live in it until midnight. And then, a little after 1 o'clock, it comes. You feel it before you understand it. A shudder in the floor, or in the air, or in you. And then, unmistakable, rolling up the river valley from the east, from London, soft with distance but deep as the bottom of a well. Guns. Everything stops. In the corridor, in the courts, in the kitchen. For one long moment the whole castle stands still, 1,000 people frozen mid-task listening. Then the Windsor bells begin. St. John's in the town first, then the others, then the curfew tower's own bells above your head, and the sound comes down through 900 years of stone and into your teeth, and somewhere below a cheer goes up from the yards, quickly hushed, and Sarah, passing you with an armful of linen, grips your wrist with her free hand, the left one, thank God, and her eyes are bright, and she says the only thing there is to say. She's done it. She's married him. Married. One syllable of sound from 21 miles away, and the whole future has just changed shape. Hers, his, England's, and in a small and unrecorded way, yours. Because now the race begins in earnest. 6 hours. The carriage is coming. Back to work. The afternoon is a controlled avalanche. Understand what has to happen in 6 hours. Every fire lit in sequence, timed like artillery. Light them too early and the coal burns down before the arrival. Too late and the rooms are cold. The head housemaid has the schedule in her head like a general, room by room. This one at 4, this one at past. The Queen's own rooms at 5 sharp. And God help the girl whose fire won't draw. Every candle lit, and there are more candles in this castle tonight than in a cathedral at Easter. Lighting them is a profession in itself. 2 footmen and a lamp boy working through the state floor with tapers, and behind them the light comes up room by room like the castle opening its eyes. The table laid in the dining room, and the laying of a royal table is a liturgy. The under-butler and his men with their measuring hands, plate carried up from the plate room under escort, actual escort, because the gold service in this building could buy a fleet, and every fork placed just so, and the yeoman of the cellars decanting by candlelight with the concentration of a surgeon. And through it all, the weather of the house keeps changing as the news arrives, hour by hour, carried by riders and by the ordinary miracle of gossip, which moves along the London road faster than seems physically possible. The wedding breakfast is over. The crowds in London are the biggest anyone has seen, bigger than the coronation, some say, rain and all. The Queen changed her dress. She travels in white satin trimmed with swan's down and a bonnet, an ordinary girl's bonnet. They left the palace at close to 4. They're travelling in one carriage, and here the below-stairs telegraph nearly breaks down in disbelief. One quite ordinary travelling coach, not the state affair, and the escort is small, and the whole progress is, by royal standards, almost private, almost human. A 20-year-old couple driving into the dusk to begin their marriage, with half the country lining the road to watch them do it. Every town on the route has turned out. Hammersmith, Brentford, Hounslow, Slough. Bonfires, bells, flags on the inns. People standing in the February mud for one look at a coach going by at a trot. At Eton, just across the river from here, the boys of the college have been building up to something all day. Word is they've got flags and torches and they intend to drag. The report is confused, either to cheer the carriage through or to physically pull it, boys instead of horses, up to the castle gates. Both, it will turn out. 500 boys in their black coats, running alongside the carriage in the torchlight, roaring their heads off. The Queen will remember it all her life. You hear all this in fragments, in passing, in the tunnel and on the stairs, and you file it away because you're in your own final descent now. 5 o'clock, the Queen's sitting room, the match. You kneel at your grate. You're great, you've earned the pronoun. And you strike the light and touch it to the paper in 3 places, and then you do the thing that separates a maid who lays fires from a maid who understands them. You wait. You watch. The flame takes the paper, hesitates, finds the kindling, and the first pine stick catches with a snap like a knuckle cracking, and the smoke rises and draws, straight up, clean. The chimney is pulling. You feel the draught come alive against your face. Cold air sliding past your ears into the fireplace. The room itself beginning to breathe through the fire. And you stay on your knees another full minute, watching the flame climb into the cold structure exactly as you built it to lump, like a rumour moving through a crowd. It burns sweet. It burns silent. It is though no one will ever say so, though the person it warms will never once think of it. A small masterpiece. You clean the hearth, fold the cloth, check the room one last time, and stop. On the writing table, propped against the inkstand, there is a letter. It was not there this morning. Someone, a lady, a secretary, one of the upper servants who exist as far above you as the Queen exists above them, has brought it up and set it ready. You cannot read the hand from where you stand, and you would not cross the room to try, because there are lines a person does not cross, and in this castle those lines are how you stay alive. But the shape of it stays with you. A letter, waiting in an empty firelit room for a woman who is at this moment somewhere between Slough and the bottom of the hill, married 4 hours, coming home to a castle full of people she will never see. You take your box and you go, and you close the door on the warm room with the soft click of a person who was never there. And now it is evening, and the castle is transformed, and you get exactly one glimpse of the transformation from the wrong side, which is the only side you will ever see it from, coming along the lower end of the grand corridor with your empty scuttle, permitted there for 4 more minutes by the written schedule. You pass the open door of the crimson drawing room, your crimson drawing room, the one that bit your hand, and it has become something not quite real. 40 feet of silk and gilt and firelight, every candle burning, the great glass chandeliers throwing the light back doubled and trebled, the whole room breathing gold. Yesterday you were inside that room on your knees with graphite in your knuckles. Tonight it belongs to a different universe, and the door between the universes is an actual door, and you are on this side of it, and that, as the whole of your 17 years has been arranged to teach you, is the natural order of the world. You look for 4 seconds, then you turn your face away, correctly, of your own accord, no housekeeper needed, and you carry your empty scuttle down the back stair. At 7:15 the sound begins. It starts in the town, below the walls. A rising note, a crowd noise, cheering coming up Thames Street and Castle Hill, like a tide coming up a channel. Then the castle guns, close this time, thudding through the stone under your feet. Then bells, everything at once. And in the servants' passages people are moving fast to windows that face the wrong way, climbing on things, and you and Sarah and half the below-stairs population of the East Wing end up crowded at a small cold window in a storeroom stair that gives, if you press your cheek against the freezing glass and look sideways, a knife-thin view of the quadrangle. Torchlight. That's what you see first. A moving constellation of it, pouring in through the gates. The Eton boys, hundreds of them, black coats and torches running with the carriage, and the noise even through the glass is enormous. Young voices all shouting together, and in the middle of it, small and dark and swaying, the carriage itself. It stops, figures move, and for one instant in the torchlight, at a distance of 60 yards, through a window the size of a hymn book, you see them. A slight girl in a white bonnet being handed down from the coach, and beside her a tall young man in a dark cloak, and they are, you will swear this to your grandchildren, laughing, both of them, wind-blown, travel-creased, deafened, married, laughing. Then a shoulder blocks your view, and Mrs. Gardner's voice comes up the stair like cold water. "Have none of you any work?" And the constellation scatters, and that is the whole of it. That is your royal wedding. 4 seconds of torchlight and a white bonnet. It's enough. You're surprised how much it's enough. The evening machine engages. Dinner goes up at 9. They dined quietly, just the two of them and the small suite, and the word that comes down with the plates is that Her Majesty ate almost nothing, and looked, said the page who said it to the footman who said it to the kitchen, as happy as it is possible for a human being to look, and also somewhat unwell from the journey, and went to lie down, and the prince sat by her, and the whole vast apparatus of the castle, the gold plate, the 10 courses, the 400 pieces of glowing copper, funneled down at the end to 2 tired 20-year-olds sitting quietly by a fire. Your fire. You're in the scullery corridor when you hear that, scraping your blacklead brushes clean, and you stand there for a moment with the brush in your ruined hand, and something moves through you that you have no word for. It is not pride, exactly. Servants are not paid to feel pride, and it would be dangerous to start. It is more like the thing the bell ringer must feel hearing his bell in the general peal. You cannot see your work, but you know your note is in the sound. But the day is not finished with you, because in a castle the day is never finished. It only changes shifts. And close to midnight it hands you the 4 seconds I promised you. It happens because of coal. Of course it happens because of coal. The night footman on the east side sends word down that the fire in the corridor outside the private apartments is dying, and the scuttles there are empty, and the schedule is broken down somewhere in the general upheaval, and someone must bring coal up the back stair now quietly, and every man with a written right to be on that floor is occupied, and Mrs. Gardner looks down a list, and the list gives her you, because you know those rooms, you know that stair, and you are, God help you, still awake. Up, along, fill the scuttle at the corridor door and down, she says. You do not enter the corridor. You do not knock. You leave it at the door and you vanish. If you hear anything, you are stone. You are furniture. Go. So you go up the back stair in the dark with 20 pounds of best Wallsend. And the castle at midnight is a different creature altogether. The daytime castle is noise held in check. The midnight castle is silence with a pulse. Your own footsteps, however carefully you place them, seem loud as hammers. The stair is black. You climb by memory, and by the cold iron rail under your left hand. The scuttle drags your right shoulder down, and the wire handle grinds against the linen over your burn, and you breathe through it, slow, the way you'd carry anything. It is only weight, and weight ends. You reach the top, the service door. Beyond it, the corridor of the private apartments, carpeted, firelit at the far end, utterly still. You ease the door open with your hip, and the warm air of the corridor touches your face like a hand, and you set the scuttle down against the wall just inside without a sound, gentler than you have ever set anything down in your life. and you are already turning back into the dark of the stair when a door opens, not near you, 30 feet down the corridor, but light spills out of it across the carpet, actual firelight and candlelight, a long warm blade of it, and there are footsteps, soft ones, slippered ones, and a voice, a man's voice, low, warm, and foreign. The consonants land in the wrong places gently, the way German lands on English. You cannot make out the words. You will spend the rest of your life not quite making out the words, and answering it, further inside the room, a woman's voice, young, quick, and laughing. Not the laugh of a queen. There is no such thing, you understand in this moment, as the laugh of a queen. It is the laugh of a girl of 20 at midnight on her wedding day, helpless with it, trying to hush herself and failing, and the man's voice says something else, and the laugh breaks out again, brighter. And you are stone, you are furniture. You are pressed into the black doorway of the service stair, 3 feet from the corridor, your heart going like a fist on a door, the burn on your hand screaming from where you've clenched it. And you do the thing Mrs. Gardner said, the thing that sounded like a figure of speech at 5 o'clock this morning. You stop breathing, because here is what is true, and you have never felt the truth of it in your body until now. If that door opens wider, if the prince of this country steps out into that corridor for any reason at all and sees in the shadow of the service door a housemaid with coal dust on her face at midnight on this of all nights, nothing cruel will happen. No one will shout. That is what makes it terrible. He would perhaps nod, courteous, puzzled, and tomorrow a quiet question would be asked and a quieter answer given, and by Friday you would be walking to Berkshire in the rain, not because anyone was angry, but because the machine of this house has one law above all others, older than the blacklead and the tea leaves and the tunnel under the quadrangle. They must never see the hands. The magic must hold. A castle that runs itself. The footsteps recede. The blade of light narrows on the carpet, narrows, and the door closes with a click as soft as the one you gave the sitting-room door at 6. A click made by someone who has also, in his own way, been trained. And the corridor is still. You breathe. Once. It shakes on the way in. Then you go down the black stair on legs you don't fully trust. One hand on the cold rail. 41 steps. And at the bottom, Sarah is waiting with a candle end because Mrs. Gardner, who misses nothing, sent her. And Sarah looks at your face and doesn't ask, and you don't tell. Not that night, not for years, not until you are old and it can't hurt anyone. And the two of you walk back through the tunnel under the sleeping castle, under the room where the most famous marriage in the world is 1 hour old, past the banked fires of the great kitchen breathing red in the dark, and up 62 stairs to the attic, and you are asleep before you finish lying down. You've been awake for 19 hours. You have carried, by any honest count, something over 1/4 ton of coal. And the last thing in your mind, sliding down into the dark, is not the guns or the torches or the gold room. It is the laugh. That helpless, hushed, ordinary laugh in the warm corridor. You came within one open door of the end of everything, and what you took away, what you will keep, is the sound of a girl your own age being, for one unguarded midnight, only happy. The bells wake you at 5, same as always, and it starts again. But the second day is a different animal, and this surprises you, and it is worth understanding why. You'd imagined a honeymoon, insofar as a housemaid imagines the private lives of monarchs, which is more than she admits and less than she'd like. as a suspension, a held breath. The world stopped for love. And the first thing the second morning teaches you is that for a queen, the world does not stop. It cannot. The red boxes arrive from London before the frost is off the grass. The dispatch boxes, locked leather cases of state papers that follow this woman every day of her reign. Wedding day, honeymoon, every day until she dies. And the messengers who carry them are stamping in the engine court by 9. She had wanted a longer honeymoon, the whole household knows it. The story has come down the stairs in pieces. She wrote to the prince before the wedding, when he suggested a proper retreat somewhere quiet, weeks of it, and told him flatly that it was impossible, that she was the sovereign, and that business can stop and wait for nothing. You're 17 and you scrub grates for your bread, and even you can hear both things inside that sentence, the iron and the ache. 3 days, that is the whole of it. The most powerful woman on earth gets 3 days at Windsor and works through part of them, and on the 3rd day there will be a dinner party, because a queen cannot even honeymoon alone. The court simply follows her at a shortened distance like a tide. But this morning, the second morning, before the boxes and the business, something happens that the castle will talk about for a week, and you see the edge of it with your own eyes. They walk out, early, shockingly early by the standards of the fashionable world, where no one of equality is conscious before 10. The Queen and the Prince, wrapped against the cold, come out onto the terrace below the east windows and walk in the frost, arm in arm, with the dog running mad circles around them, and there is nobody with them. No suite, no ladies. 2 figures and a spaniel on a white lawn under a low pink February sun, their breath showing, their footprints the first marks in the frost. And from the corner window of the room where you are, where you happen, in the fullest possible innocence, to be dusting, you watch the Queen of England scoop up a handful of frost off a stone urn and flick it at the consort of England, who receives it in the shoulder like a man shot on the field of honour and staggers accordingly, and the dog loses its mind entirely. You dust the same 6 inches of window shelf for 4 minutes. It is the best theatre you will ever attend. And here is what you think, 17 years old, with graphite in your knuckles and a burn going stiff under its bandage, watching 2 of the most scrutinised human beings alive playing in the frost, because for once, for 3 days, on 13 private acres behind 900 years of wall, nobody can see them. Everyone in this castle is hiding from someone. You hide from them. They hide from the world. The whole building is a machine for not being seen, and it is the only place in her entire kingdom where that girl can throw frost at her husband. The wall that keeps you invisible is the same wall that sets her free. You will turn that thought over for years, on and off, like a smooth stone in a pocket, and never entirely decide what it means. Some thoughts are for keeping, not for solving. The rest of the second day you learn the castle's secret comedy, and you learn it from the oldest man in the building. His name is Mr. Frayne, and he is one of the table-deckers, the men who set out and maintain the furnishings of the state apartments. And he has been in royal service, man and boy, for 51 years. He served mad old King George III. He remembers the poor king wandering the North Terrace in his dressing gown, blind and white-bearded, talking to trees. He served fat King George IV, who built half of what you polish. He served King William, who died 2.5 years ago and made a girl of 18 into a queen before breakfast. Mr. Frayne moves at one speed, which is his own, and even Mrs. Gardiner adjusts around him the way traffic adjusts around a church, You're sent to help him this afternoon, carrying for him while he inspects the state floor, and he talks the whole time, low and dry, a lifetime of the place leaking out of him, and it is from Mr. Frayne, between the throne room and the Waterloo chamber, that you learn how the castle truly works, which is to say, it doesn't. You laid the fire in Her Majesty's sitting room, he says. Not a question. Everything is known below stairs. And lit it. Yes, Mr. Frayne. Then you committed a wonder, girl, though you don't know it. In my grandfather's time, and not so long after neither, laying a fire and lighting a fire were two different kingdoms. The Lord Steward's people laid it. The Lord Chamberlain's people lit it. Two departments, two masters, and if the two men didn't meet, and why would they meet? The fire sat cold, and a King of England shivered in his own house, while two office books argued about whose page he was on. He pauses to breathe on a pier glass and frown at what the breath reveals. Same with the windows. Inside of the glass, one department. Outside of the glass, the woods and forests. You could clean your side and wait a month for the other side, and the king looked out at the world through one clean layer and one dirty one, which, he says, straightening a chair by a quarter-inch, is very like being a king generally. You laugh before you can stop it, and he permits this with a small nod, as if signing for a delivery. He tells you the rest as you go. The candles change daily, whether burned or not, the barely used ends carried off by footmen as an ancient rite and sold back to the trade. There are men in this castle whose candle money is worth more than their wages, the wine that vanishes by the ancient law of taking, the 35 men by his count whose posts have outlived the reasons for their posts. It is not theft exactly, or rather it is theft of such antiquity that it has become architecture. The whole household is a coral reef of old arrangements, each one dead and each one load-bearing. And now, says Mr. Frayne, stopping at last at the great window at the end of the corridor, comes this German boy, and do you know what they say of him? They say he rises at 7. They say he reads the accounts, reads them himself with his own eyes, adding the figures. He lets that sit in the air the way a man might report that the new tenant intends to plough the churchyard. There's them below stairs laughing at it, a prince with an account book. I'm not laughing, girl. I've watched this house eat money for 51 years, a river of it, and no man ever stood in the river before. If that boy is what they say, everything here will change, not this year, not next. But you're 17. You'll see it. And he is right, though neither of you can know how right. Within a very few years, the prince at whose closed door you stood last night will take the whole rotten, magnificent machinery of this household into his own hands and rebuild it. Merge the warring departments, put one master of the household over the lot, hunt the dead posts and the candle money and the double-cleaned windows out of their ancient burrows. The comedy Mr. Frayne has just performed for you in a corridor will be studied in an office and killed with a pen. Half the household will curse the prince's name for it, and the fires will light on time forever after, and both of those things will be true at once, because that is how reform always feels from below. Mind the sun, Mr. Frayne says suddenly, and you don't understand, and he points with his chin at the carpet, where the low, winter light has crossed the floor toward a curtain edge. He shifts the curtain 4 inches. Sunlight's the same as spilled wine, only slower. Everything in this house is being destroyed all the time, by light, by damp, by coal smoke, by us walking on it. Our whole work, girl, all of it, every soul below stairs. It isn't cleaning. It's holding back time. You can't win. You can only lose slowly and beautifully. He looks at the corrected curtain with the satisfaction of a man who has just parried a sword thrust from eternity. Lose slowly and beautifully. There's your trade in 4 words. Now fetch me the small steps. You will remember that, on your knees on 100 future hearths. Lose slowly and beautifully. It is, you will come to think, the best working description not only of housemaiding but of nearly everything. That evening, the second evening, the castle relaxes by one held breath. The royal couple dine with a small suite. There is music afterward. You hear it. Everyone on the east side hears it. Faint through the floors, a piano, and then unmistakably singing. 2 voices. The whole below stairs freezes into an attitude of elaborate not listening, which is the servant's way of listening with the entire body. The prince plays, the queen sings, the queen plays, the prince sings, and the duets come down through the stone like light through water, blurred and lovely. And in the scullery a laundry maid with forearms like a blacksmith stands stock still over the copper, with tears sliding down her face, and dares anyone to remark on it. Nobody remarks on it. There are rules. And you spend that second evening learning the other half of your trade, the half no ballad will ever mention, in the lamp room and the candle room with the boy they call Wick, who is 14 and freckled and knows more about light than any bishop knows about heaven. Because tomorrow night is the dinner party, the real one, the court arriving, and Wick's empire must be ready, and Wick has requisitioned you. The lamp room smells of oil and spirits and brass polish, a thick, headachy, golden smell that gets into your dress and stays for days. Every lamp in the castle comes down here to be dressed, wicks trimmed to a perfect flat edge. A ragged wick smokes. A smoking lamp in a stateroom is a hanging offence, spiritually speaking. Reservoirs filled, chimneys of glass washed in vinegar water and polished with soft rag until they squeak, then held up to the candle one by one, turned, inspected for the least smear, because a smeared chimney throws a shadow, and tomorrow night there must be no shadows. Your fingers learn the work fast. The click of the wick scissors, the cold weight of the glass, the way you cradle a chimney in your apron like an egg. Your burned hand hates the fine work and does it anyway. By the end you have trimmed and dressed 40 lamps, and your hands smell of oil, and Wick surveys the ranked and gleaming glass like an admiral reviewing a fleet. Lights the whole secret of them upstairs, he says, wiping his scissors. You know what a room full of wax candles costs for one evening? More than you earn in a quarter. When the quality walk into a room, and it's all gold and glowing, and they feel, blessed, like, that's not God, that's us. That's £40 of best wax in my chimneys. He holds one last glass up to the flame, turns it, finds it perfect. We make the shine. They feel the shine. That's the whole arrangement ever since there's been castles. Seems to suit everyone. He grins, freckles moving. Mind, one day they'll light room some other way, some clever way. No smoke nor trimming. And then where's Wick, eh? Where indeed? Gas is in the London streets already. There are men alive tonight who will live to see this very castle wired for electric light. Wick's whole art, the trimming and the vinegar water and the fleet of perfect chimneys, is a candle already guttering. But that is tomorrow's grief. And below stairs, tomorrow's grief is the one luxury everyone can afford to skip. You climb the 62 stairs, you crack the ice. Well, you check for ice. Tonight there is only cold water, which passes for spring. You sleep like something dropped down a well. The third day is the dinner party, and the dinner party nearly kills the kitchen. You're not kitchen staff, but on a day like this the boarders below stairs dissolve, and by mid-morning you're in the tunnel again, drafted into the endless relay of carrying, and so you see the great kitchen at full stretch, which is a thing worth seeing once and worth avoiding forever after. Picture 30 men and boys in white, in a room hot as August, moving at a dead run without ever running. That same castle trick, speed without the appearance of speed. The chief cook stands at the centre like the still pin of a wheel, and around him the whole science of French cookery, which has conquered the English great house as thoroughly as any army. Stockpots big enough to bathe in, whispering since Tuesday, a roasting range with its smoke jack turning the spits by the draught of its own chimney, an iron machine 200 years old and still spinning, fans in the flue whirring like a trapped bird. Pastry cooks in the cool room with marble under their hands, sweating anyway. The confectioner assembling a sugar centrepiece with tweezers, and the face of a man diffusing something. The heat hits you at the door like a hand on the chest. The sound is boiling point in every sense. Fat spitting, copper ringing, the cook's low French-English patter, the smoke jack's whir, cleavers going through bone on the block with a sound you feel in your own knees, and the smell, layer on layer on layer, roasting beef and game birds turning gold, fish under vinegar, burnt caramel, melted butter in quantities that would make a dairy weep, and cutting through all of it, sharp as a shout, fresh lemons, lemons in February, sent up from the hothouses, worth their weight in silver. Tonight they will send up dinner for a table of guests in the oak room, and then supper. Besides, course after course in the French style the court now demands, and every dish will travel from this inferno along the tunnel and up the stairs in a covered convoy, timed so that hot arrives hot, and the men who carry it will move like the guards trooping the colour, and upstairs it will float onto the table as if it condensed out of the candlelight. You know better now. You have seen the engine room. Nothing upstairs floats. Everything upstairs is carried. Twice that day you nearly go under. The first time is on the kitchen stairs mid-afternoon, with a tray of empty copper moulds, light work, a mercy assignment, when your foot finds a patch of grease some hurrying boy has left, and the world swings, and you take the whole weight sideways into the wall, elbow and hip, copper crashing against copper in your arms, but not hitting the stone. You stand there shaking, pressed to the wall, holding 11 moulds and your own heartbeat, while 3 people flow past you without a glance, because a near miss is not an event. Below stairs, the only events are catastrophes. Your hip will wear the bruise for a fortnight, a great sunset of a bruise. Nobody will ever see it. It joins the burn and the graphite and the cracked skin across your knuckles where the cold and the soda have opened it in fine red lines. In the private ledger your body keeps of a life in service. They don't pay wages for that ledger. It fills up all the same. The second time is simpler. At 6 o'clock, standing in the lamp corridor waiting for Wick, you fall asleep. Upright. Eyes open, or nearly. 3 days of 19-hour shifts, and the body simply banks itself like a fire, and you come back with a jerk to find Wick looking up at you with scientific interest. "You was gone," he says, standing there like a hat stand. "I seen the old footman do it at the door of a levee. 2 hours at attention, fast asleep, eyes open. It's a skill." He hands you a taper. "Come on, we're lighting the corridor." And so it happens that at 7 o'clock on the last evening of the honeymoon of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, you're one of the 6 people who light the grand corridor. 550 feet of it, lamp by lamp and candle by candle, working from both ends toward the middle, and the light comes up behind you as you go, catching the gilt frames and the marble, and the long red carpet you once swept with tea leaves, until the whole immense passage glows like the inside of an instrument, and from the far end, faint, comes the sound of the court assembling, silk, moving, low voices, somewhere a violin being tuned, and you and your taper slip out through the service door precisely 30 seconds before the first guests turn the corner and the magic holds. The corridor lit itself. The castle loves them personally. From the storeroom stair, later, you hear the dinner as weather, a distant front of voices, laughter arriving in gusts, the small thunder of chairs at the end of it. The Queen is said to be radiant. The Prince is said to have charmed even the ladies who came prepared to find him dull. Toasts are drunk, and below, in the servants' hall, the household has its own supper at last, at 10 o'clock. Bread and cheese and beer and the boiled ends of grander things, and the talk is loose and warm the way it only gets when the worst is over and someone produces a fiddle, briefly, until a look from the steward's room retires it. You eat like a horse. You're asleep at the table between one bite and the next. For a second or an hour you never know. Sarah's shoulder is there. The hall roars gently around you like the sea in a shell. 3 days. That was the honeymoon. On the 4th day, the court machinery folds itself back toward London, and the ordinary rain resumes, and the castle exhales, and Mrs. Gardiner grants the staff, with the air of an empress distributing provinces, a half-day each in rotation. Yours falls on the Sunday. Falls, and Sarah, who has been at Windsor 3 years and knows things, tells you what to do with it. Church first, she says, or she'll have your hide. Then the round tower. Tell the man at the door your household, and it's your half-day. He's my cousin's husband, he'll let you up. Best view in England, and you need it. You've gone all corridor-shaped. You've forgotten there's an outside. She's right, is the thing. 14 months, and your whole world has narrowed to passages and grates, to the underground tunnel and the 62 stairs, to a life lived entirely inside the walls of one building, like a mouse in a cathedral organ. You know the castle the way a sailor knows a ship. You've almost forgotten it is standing on a hill in the middle of a country. So on Sunday after church, St. George's Chapel, the household in its own seats at the back, the fan vaulting overhead like stone frost, the banners of 600 years of Garter knights hanging dead still in the cold air, and under the floor, though you try not to think of it during the sermon, kings. Henry VIII is down there, and Charles I, the one they beheaded, brought here quietly through the snow. After all that, you cross the middle ward in the thin gold afternoon, and you climb the round tower. 200 steps, more or less, spiralling up the great drum that William the Conqueror's mound has carried for nearly 8 centuries, that Wyatville jacked 30 feet higher within living memory to please a dead king's eye. Your legs, which thought they had felt everything stairs can do, learn otherwise. The stone is cold under your hand, worn glassy at the turns by uncountable other hands. Arrow slits strobe the daylight past you. Your breath goes ragged. Then finds a rhythm, and the rhythm carries you out at last through a low door into wind and light and the top of the world. And England lies down at your feet. You've never been higher than a hayloft in your life. Now you are standing on the highest point of the oldest continuously inhabited castle on earth, and the horizon has simply moved back, the way a crowd moves back from an accident, and left you the middle of everything. Below you, the castle itself, seen whole for the first time, the 2 great wards, the chapel roof like an upturned ship, the smoke of 100 chimneys rising straight in the still cold air. And you can name the chimneys. That's the strange thing. You know which smoke is the great kitchen and which is the laundry and which thin blue thread is the very fire you laid this morning. To the north, below the terrace, the Thames, a ribbon of hammered pewter, and on its far bank the chapel and courts of Eton, where the boys who drag the carriage are, at this moment, being made to construe Latin as if nothing had happened. To the south, the long walk runs away from you between its elms, 3 miles of dead straight avenue diminishing to a point on Snow Hill, geometry imposed on a green world by a king a century and a half dead. The great park spreads beyond it, thousands of acres, deer moving in the far distance like weather on the grass, villages, church towers, one behind another, each with its ring of bells that took up the news from the guns 4 days ago. On the very edge of sight, a low smudge to the east that a man beside you, an old warder, glad of company, says is London itself, the coal smoke of 1.5 million people hanging on the horizon like a distant cliff, and the wind up here smells of nothing. That's what undoes you slightly. After 14 months of tallow and coal dust and soda and oil and boiled mutton and other people, the wind off the great park smells of cold and grass and distance, of nothing at all, which turns out to be the most beautiful smell there is. You stand there a long time, long enough for your fingers to go numb on the parapet and for you to decide you don't care. Because here is what you see, 17 years old, from the top of the round tower, and what you could never see from inside the walls. The castle is not the world. From the corridors it feels like the world. It feels like the world feels, endless, ancient, arranged, with you very small at the bottom of it. But from up here it is one building on one hill, and the world is that enormous quiet country, going on and on to the smoke of London and past it, farms and rivers and towns full of people who have never laid a fire for a queen and are getting on perfectly well. Your village is out there somewhere west behind you, an afternoon's ride away. Your mother is in it, probably at this hour asleep over her mending by the fire, a fire nobody inspects, in a cottage where nobody has ever once had to turn her face to the wall. You're not trapped. That's the thought that arrives, simple as the wind. You walked in through those gates 14 months ago, and one day, next year, or in 5 years, or in 20, with a housekeeper's black silk of your own, or a husband, or just to settle back and a small savings book, you will walk out of them, and the castle will not notice, and that is not a sad thing. The castle notices nobody, not you, and not, in the end, them. Kings are down there under the chapel floor being not noticed by the same stones. The building goes on. The people pass through it, all of them, at every level carrying their coal and their crowns. Lose slowly and beautifully, said Mr. Frayne. From up here you can see what he meant, and see that it applies to considerably more than curtains. You climb down while the light lasts. 200 steps. Your knees make small formal complaints. By the bottom, you are hungry in the plain, cheerful way of a body that has been given for once, exactly one afternoon of being 17, and then the weeks close over the honeymoon like water over a stone, and the castle teaches you its longest lesson, which is the year itself. Because the court comes back. It always comes back. Windsor is not a house that has events. Windsor is a wheel, and you are learning its turning. The spring brings the Ascot races in June, and the castle crammed to the attics with guests, every bed made, every grate lit. The corridors at midnight full of visiting valets losing their way. You learn to sleep in snatches and to tell the quality servants from the quality, which is not always easy, the valets being generally the better dressed. The summer brings heat under the slates of your attic until the maids carry their mattresses to the floor below, and it brings the smell of mown grass up over the terrace in green waves, and one broiling July day it brings word that the Queen, married 5 months, is expecting a child, and the below-stairs world receives this news with proprietary satisfaction, as of a farm that has had good rain. The autumn brings mud and wet livery and the endless drying rooms, brings the first fires of the season, and with them your second winter's blacklead, and you find your hands have learned the grate so thoroughly that you can dress one in 12 minutes and think about something else entirely while you do it, which is either mastery or a small death, depending on the day. In November the child is born, a princess, and the castle guns fire again, and the bells go again, and you stand in the kitchen court with ash on your apron listening to the same peal that told you about the wedding, and you realise you're now a person who was here, a person with a before. The new maids, there are new maids, greener than grass. One of them cried her first week the way you never admitted to crying. The new maids ask you how things are done. You hear yourself say, it gets easier, and you hear, inside your own voice, everyone who ever said it to you. And through that whole turning year, in glimpses, always from windows, from stairheads, through the 4-second gaps in the machinery, you watch the marriage you helped to warm on its first night become a fact of the world. The prince at the Queen's side at the reviews, the prince, exactly as Mr. Frayne prophesied, deep in the account books, and the first tremors of it reaching below stairs. Questions asked that were never asked, lists compared that were never compared. One memorable morning on which somebody official wishes to know, in writing, what becomes of the candle ends, and the footmen's faces go the colour of the candle ends. The two of them riding out down the long walk in the early mornings, small and far off between the great elms. It is not your business. None of it is your business. But you laid the first fire, and you stood in the dark 3 feet from the first midnight of it, and a person cannot help feeling, quietly, like a gardener who once watered something that grew. Mr. Frayne dies in his sleep in the spring, in his room over the state entrance, 52 years a servant of the crown, and is buried in the town with 6 table-deckers carrying him, and Mrs. Gardner, terribly upright, in the second pew. You inherit nothing from him except the 4 words, which is the only part of him he'd have thought worth leaving. Wick is made second lampman before he's 16. Sarah walks out with a sergeant of the guards, decorously, on alternate Sundays, and the attic room follows the campaign like a war. And you are given, at the year's turn, the care of the Queen's private sitting room outright, yours alone, fires and dusting and all, which is in the currency of your world a knighthood. Mrs. Gardner informs you of it in the corridor in 11 words and is gone before you can answer. You go up that evening and stand in the empty room a moment. The piano, the work-basket, the china dogs, the writing table where the famous words were written. And then you get down on your knees on the hearth-cloth and dress the grate. Because that is what standing in rooms comes to, in the end, for people like you, and because this is the part nobody above stairs will ever understand. The work itself, the brush, and the blacking, and the small perfect architecture of coal has become, somewhere in the turning of the year, not the thing you do instead of a life. It is the life. Your hands know things now, There is a whole language in your hands. Let me take you through one more ordinary day from that year, because the ordinary days are the truth of it, and because there is one kind of day I have kept from you, and it is the hardest one. Scrubbing day. Once a week, sections of the servants' quarters and the lower corridors are scrubbed. Not swept, not mopped, scrubbed. And scrubbing in 1840 is a technology of exactly 4 parts: water, soda, a brush, and a girl. You start at 6 with the water, and the water starts cold, because hot water is boiled water, and boiled water is coal, and coal is money, and the ledger has decided that below a certain floor of the castle, cold will do. You kneel on a folded sack, because the stone will otherwise eat your knees alive. Housemaid's knee is a real affliction with a real name. Doctors write it in their books. It is a swelling of the joint from a life spent kneeling on stone, and half the older women in this castle walk with it. A small stiff dip in every stride, the trade's own signature. You work the brush in circles, always circles, soda dissolving the grease of boots and drips and years, and the soda works on your hands exactly as it works on the floor, which is the whole problem. It dissolves you too. By the second hour, the cracks across your knuckles have opened and the grey water finds them, a bright wire of pain with every stroke, and you do what every woman in this corridor does, which is nothing. At the midday break, you grease your hands with kitchen dripping begged from the scullery, working it into the cracks, and the relief is so complete it is nearly shameful. The sound of a scrubbing corridor is its own music. 6 brushes going in 6 rhythms, stone hiss and bristle knock, the clank of pails, the long swipe of the drying cloths, and under it, always, someone humming. It is Sarah's year for a tune about a sailor, and by March the entire east wing below stairs hates the sailor personally. Your world narrows to the yard of stone in front of you. Grey water, circles, the ache establishing itself in the shoulders, then the small of the back, then everywhere, a full body tide that comes in and does not go out. There is a state you reach in about the 4th hour that you have no word for, though the centuries after you will find several. The mind detaches, floats an inch above the work, and thinks its own long thoughts while the body goes on alone. Some of the best thinking of your life happens on your knees in a wet corridor. Nobody will ever collect it. That is true of nearly all the thinking there has ever been. At the end of the day, the corridor is clean, which means it has begun again to get dirty, and you understand Mr. Frayne with your spine now, not just your head. On Sundays, when your hands have closed up enough to hold a pen, you write home. A single sheet, both sides crossed, written one way and then turned and written over the top at right angles. 2 layers of words interleaved, because paper is dear and postage is dearer. The person receiving the letter pays, and your mother must not be made to pay for 2 sheets. You have things to tell that no one in the village has ever seen, and no way to say most of them. You do not tell her about the midnight corridor. You do not tell her about the burn, which has healed to a smooth pink seam across 3 fingers that you will carry to your grave. A line you can read with your thumb in the dark like a private inscription. You tell her about the frost fight on the terrace, and the Eton boys with the torches, and that you are well, and that you're learning, and that you send 4 shillings inside, and all of it is true, and the largest truths go between the lines the way the 2nd layer of writing goes between the first, and she will read every layer because mothers can. And once, only once that year, The two halves of the castle's world touch you at the same moment, and it happens as everything happens to you in a corridor. It is a spring evening, and you're coming along the private apartment passage at the permitted hour with linen, and ahead of you a door opens and a lady comes out, and you turn to the wall, correctly, linen to your chest, eyes on the wainscot. But she stops. You can feel her stop, and a voice says, "Not to you." There is someone with her, a voice with a German edge, quick and low and angry, in the way that only very controlled people are angry. And I am telling you it cannot continue. He counts the candles now. The candles. She was a queen before ever he set foot. And the other voice hushes her, and the two of them move away in a rustle of silk, and you stand with your face to the wall and your heart going, having recognized, because everyone below stairs knows every voice in this building, the Baroness, Letzen, the Queen's old governess, the woman who raised her, who sat by her bed through every childhood illness, who has run the Queen's private household and the royal nursery accounts like a small sovereign state of her own for 20 years. And the he who counts the candles needs no name. You tell no one. That is the deepest rule, deeper than the wall turning. What passes above stairs did not happen. But you carry it, and over the following 2 years you watch, in the glimpses that are your whole vantage on history, the quiet war it announced. The governess and the husband, the old guard and the new broom, contesting inch by inch the ground of one young woman's life, until the year the Baroness leaves at last for Germany, with a pension and a carriage and whatever a person packs of 20 years, and the prince's hand closes finally over the whole machinery, nursery and candle ends and all. The histories will tell it as politics. You saw it as a voice in a corridor, shaking very slightly on the word candles. History, seen from the servant's side, is always somebody's voice in a corridor. That is the version they don't write down, and it is the truest one you will ever have. Before the summer turns dangerous, let me give you one more piece of the world, because you would not forgive me for leaving it out, and neither would Sarah, the day they finally send you down into the town. It happens in May. The head housemaid needs thread matched. A silk trim in the private apartments has frayed. The exact green must be found, and the sewing room samples have failed, and somebody with young eyes and clean boots must carry the snippet down to the drapers in Peascod Street and not come back with the wrong green. 14 months inside the walls, and suddenly you're walking out under the gate arch with a scrap of silk pinned inside a fold of paper in your pocket, like a spy carrying a cipher, into the roar of an ordinary English market town on an ordinary English morning, and the roar nearly knocks you flat. Because here is a thing you had forgotten, noise that isn't governed. Inside the castle, every sound has a permit. Out here, Castle Hill and Thames Street and Peascod Street are a free-for-all of iron tyres on cobbles, and carters swearing at carters with a fluency that would get a footman dismissed twice over, and a fishwife singing out her place and her eels in a voice trained on 40 years of open air. And the coaching inns. The town is stitched onto the London road, coaches through all day, with their yards full of stamping teams and ostlers, and the smell of hot horse and leather and spilled ale. Dogs everywhere on their own urgent business. A ballad seller with a board of printed sheets, and half of them, you notice with a small jolt of ownership, are royal. The wedding still selling in May, the Queen and the Prince in crude woodcut, arm in arm, tuppence, and the man is crying them with the same voice he'd use for a murder, because to a ballad seller it's all the same stock, and the smells, after the castle's ordered smells, come at you like a mob. fish and horse and baking bread, tallow from a chandler's open door, the sweet rot of the market gutters, coal smoke from 300 ordinary chimneys, and under it, always, the river. The Thames at the bottom of the hill, mud and weed and running water, the smell of the county you grew up in, and it catches you unprepared, halfway down Peascod Street, a full second of your mother's kitchen and the brook behind the church, delivered free of charge by a change of wind. The draper's is dim and holy, like all drapers, bolts to the ceiling. The proprietor takes your snippet to the light of the door, holds it, hums, and pulls down 3 greens, and you learn something in the next 10 minutes that surprises you. 14 months of castle work have given you eyes. You can see plainly that his first green is too blue and his second too yellow, and you say so, respectfully, and hold your ground when he presses, because you have stood in that room 100 times at every hour of light, and you know what the silk does at noon and what it does by candlelight, and he does not. He looks at you again, differently, the look tradesmen keep for people who cannot be sold the wrong thing, and brings down a 4th green from a high shelf, and it is right, and you both know it is right, and something passes between you that is nothing at all, and that you will remember for years. The small nod of one competent person to another, across a counter, over a matter of green. You walk back up the hill with a thread and a penny bun eaten in 6 bites. Hot, sweet, grease on your fingers, the single best meal of the year, and don't argue. And at the top you stop and look at the thing you live in. From the town the castle is not corridors. From the town it is a grey cliff with flags on it, filling a quarter of the sky. And the people around you glance up at it the way people glance at weather. A fact, a landlord, a picture on the money. A carter's boy beside you, waiting for his team to sort themselves, follows your eyes up the walls and says companionably to no one in particular, "They say she's in London." And you say, before you can help it, she is. They came back for the races, though, and the long walk's a sight when they ride out early. And the boy looks at you, at your plain grey dress and your castle-issue boots, and his whole face changes and he says, "You're never from up there." Up there, 2 words doing the work of a fairy tale, and you say yes, and for one strange sunlit moment on Castle Hill, you're the most interesting person this boy has ever met. You, Hannah Price, with graphite in your knuckles and a burn seam on your hand because you come from inside the picture on the money. You could tell him anything. You could tell him about the tunnel, the gold plate under escort, the frost fight, the laugh through the door. He would carry it to every tap room in the county. You tell him the long walk is a sight when they ride out early, which is true and public and already said, and you wish him good day. Because that is the other thing the castle has built into you now, deeper than the wall turning, deeper than the soft click of doors. The things you know are not stories, they are trusts. Nobody swore you to it. There is no oath for housemaids. There doesn't need to be. You hold the private mornings of the most public family on earth in your 2 cracked hands, and you have discovered, climbing the hill, licking the last of the bun grease from your thumb, that you would no more sell them than you'd sell your mother's letters. Not from fear, from something with no name in your vocabulary yet, though the centuries will find words for it and argue about them. Call it this, they never see you, and you keep them anyway. It is the most one-sided loyalty in the world, and it is yours, and you chose it on a hill in the sunshine, eating a bun, 17 years old without anyone watching, which, you're beginning to understand is how all the choices that matter get made. Then you go in under the gate and give up the noise and the walls take you back. And then comes the 10th of June and the day the castle learns what fear tastes like. It is a warm evening, early summer, the terrace roses out, the court in London for the season, the castle running at its quiet, between times rhythm. And a little after 9, hard hoofbeats come up Castle Hill. Not the post, not the pattern of any ordinary rider. Everyone below stairs knows the ordinary sounds the way a mother knows her child's step on the stair, and this is not ordinary. This is a horse ridden hard from London, and it comes through the gate without slowing, and within 10 minutes the news is in every corridor of the building. Moving the way, fire moves through a hayloft. Someone has shot at the Queen. The words don't fit anywhere at first. You're in the servants' hall when they arrive, and you watch them land on face after face and fail to fit. Shot at the Queen. On Constitution Hill in the open carriage. The evening drive. She takes it daily. Everyone knows she takes it daily. Up the hill from the palace with the prince beside her. Low carriage. No ceremony. Close enough to the rails for the crowds to see her face. That has been the whole charm of it. And a man stood at the rail, an ordinary young man, and waited for the carriage, and raised a pistol, and fired, and missed, and drew a second pistol as she. The reports will disagree forever about exactly what she did, but the below-stairs version, the one you will always believe, is that she stood, or rose, or at the least did not cower, and he fired again, and missed again, at a distance of a few yards, twice, at a woman 4 months gone with child, and the crowd came over the rails and had him before the smoke cleared. And then, this is the part that undoes the servants' hall, that makes the laundry-maid with the blacksmith's arm sit down abruptly on a bench. Then the Queen and the Prince did not turn back. They drove on. They went up to her mother's house so that her mother should hear it from her own mouth and not from the streets. And then they drove home through the park at the usual pace, through crowds that had heard already and were roaring, every rider and every carriage in the park falling in around them like an escort of the whole city. And she bowed, and was pale, and was 21 years old, and went into dinner. The man's name, you will learn, is Edward Oxford. He is 18. He is a potboy, a public-house servant, one of your own class, a boy who carried tankards for his bread. And something in him is broken or burning, and the trial will call it madness and lock him away for most of his natural life, and the pistols may not even have been loaded with ball. No one will ever prove it either way. 18. A servant. That detail sits below stairs like a stone in the shoe. It would almost be easier if he had been a lord. That night the castle cannot sleep, and does not really try. There is no reason for fear here. She is in London. The danger is in London. The danger is over. But fear is not a reasoning animal. The night watch is doubled without anyone quite ordering it. Mrs. Gardiner walks the corridors until 2, keys whispering, and nobody finds it strange. In the attic, the 8 of you lie awake in the summer dark and talk in low voices about where you were when you heard, already telling it as a story, already fixing it, because that is what people do with fear. They narrate it until it holds still. Sarah says what everyone is thinking, into the dark to the rafters. She stood up. And that is the sentence that goes around the country. Not the pistols, not the potboy, not the trial. She stood up. Within days it is in the prints and the ballads. Within a fortnight the crowds around her carriage are thicker than they ever were for the wedding, and the papers that mocked her marriage and sneered at her German prince cannot sell enough pictures of the two of them, and you understand, watching it from the corridor side of history, Something about how nations fall in love. They had a wedding, and it was charming. Then they had 2 pistol shots on a June evening, and a girl who stood up, and a husband who covered her with his own body. That is in the accounts too, that he pulled her down and shielded her, and depending which version reaches you, he did it before or after or during her standing, and you noticed that the country happily believes all versions at once. Brave him, brave her, both true, printed side by side. That is when it stopped being an arranged royal marriage and became the marriage. Love, it turns out, is demonstrated to nations the same way it is demonstrated to housemaids, not by ceremonies, but by what the body does in the second before thought. The summer absorbs it, as summers do. The Queen resumes the evening drives, that is its own kind of standing up, and the castle year rolls on toward the November guns and the new princess. But something has shifted permanently in the household's blood, and you feel it most plainly in the strangest of duties, fire watch. Because the other fear, the old fear, the constant one, the one that was here before Edward Oxford and will outlast him, is fire. A castle lit by 10,000 open flames is a bonfire that has simply not started yet, and every servant knows it. Candles, lamps, 600 grates, kitchen ranges, tapers carried up dark stairs by tired children. The whole gorgeous glowing apparatus of the place is one unattended wick away from catastrophe, and the household lives with that the way sailors live with the sea. There are men whose nightly work is nothing else. Walking the floors after the house sleeps, floor by floor, corridor by corridor, checking that every fire is guarded, every lamp out or trimmed low, sniffing the air at each stairhead like hounds, because smoke announces itself to the nose long before the eye. Twice that year you're given a share of the early watch on your own corridors, a candle lantern and a list, and you learn the castle at its most secret hour, 2 in the morning, when even the kitchen only breathes. The long dark passages, your small ring of light, the banked grates, each with their low red eye, the building creaking and ticking around you as its stones give back the day's heat, 900 years of timber and tapestry hanging quietly in the dark, all of it flammable, all of it yours until 4 o'clock. You will be an old woman decades from now, when word comes that the castle is finally burned, not all of it, but the great state rooms, a terrible fire spreading room to room exactly as every servant of your generation always knew it could, and you will be perhaps the only person in your village who, hearing it, thinks first not of the treasures but of the night watch, of some successor of yours in some corridor smelling it too late. But that is far away. In 1840 the fire is still only a fear, and fear, you're learning, is simply part of the furniture of a great house. You dust around it. On quiet evenings, when the court is away and the work is finished early, there are such evenings, a handful a month, and they are the wages the ledger doesn't record. You sit sometimes in the window of the maid's sewing room with your mending, and watch the light die over the great park, and take an inventory of your life the way Mrs. Gardner takes inventory of the linen. The room is warm, the sewing room fire is one of the sanctioned ones, small, coaxed along on cinders, and full of the small sounds of women at rest and at work at once. Needle hiss through wool, the snip of thread bitten or cut, the tick of the fire settling, someone reading a week-old newspaper out loud in a slow, careful voice, the words of London and Parliament, and the world coming out flattened into Berkshire vowels. Your own hands work without you. Darning is a language your fingers speak while your mind goes wherever minds go at dusk. You think about the people this year has strung along your memory like beads. Mr. Frayne, who is under the grass now in Windsor churchyard, and who gave you 4 words that have turned out to be a compass. Wick, an empire of glass and oil, who will be headlamp man before he shaves properly, and obsolete before he's grey, and who would laugh at both facts equally, because that is the kind of animal Wick is. Sarah, whose sergeant had been promoted, and whose Sundays are now a serial the whole attic follows like a novel in numbers. The old warder on the round tower, who stands all day beside the best view in England and has stopped seeing it, which taught you something you're careful with. Mrs. Gardner, who you have concluded, over months, reluctantly, from small evidence, a maid nursed through fever with beef tea from the housekeeper's own room, a girl in trouble sent home to her mother with wages paid to the quarter and no word said. Mrs. Gardner, who is kind, and who has organised her entire face and voice so that no one shall ever prove it, and the 2 of them, her and him. You think about the strangest fact of your position, which is that you know things about the most famous couple in the world that the newspapers would pay money for, and every one of those things is small, and the smallness is the treasure. The newspapers have the wedding, the crowds, the assassin, the state. You have a girl's helpless midnight laugh through a warm door, frost thrown and taken in the shoulder like a bullet on the field of honour. 2 voices in a duet coming down through stone, blurred and lovely. A letter waiting against an inkstand in an empty firelit room. History from above is made of treaties and dates. History from below stairs is made of sounds through floors, and you have come to believe, you will believe it all your life, that yours is the accurate version. Nations are governed from the staterooms, but nobody ever lived in a stateroom. Living happens at the temperature of the small rooms, hers and yours alike, and the small rooms are your kingdom. You think about your body, because your body has become a document. The burned seam on the right hand, smooth now, readable in the dark. The knuckles that crack open every winter and close every spring like a field. The left shoulder that sits a little lower than the right from 14 months of the scuttle, and always will. Decades from now, a grandchild sitting on your lap will pat that shoulder, and you will feel, faintly, the wire handle through the folded cloth. Housemaid's knee, filing its first quiet claims. You're 17 going on 18, and you carry a full ledger already, and here is the odd thing, you would not trade it. Girls at home your age have smooth hands and have seen nothing. Your hands could pass for 40, and have built the fire a queen wrote history beside. Every trade in the world is the same bargain. The work takes your body apart and hands it back to you rewritten, and you have decided on the whole, in the sewing room window, with the light dying over the park, that you can live with the terms. You think about what you can't see coming, which is everything. You don't know, no one in this building knows, that the marriage whose first fire you laid will fill 9 cradles, that the prince who counts candles will count his way through the whole household and then keep going. Museums, universities, a great glass exhibition hall like nothing the world has seen, until this country that jeered his allowance can no longer imagine itself without him. You don't know that he will be dead at 42 of a fever in this very castle, in the blue room below where kings died before him, and that the girl who laughed through the door will wear black for him for 40 years, and that the name of this castle will become her name, the Widow of Windsor, and the halls you polish will go quiet in a way that no housemaid can fix. You don't know that she will reign so long that the century itself will be handed her name to wear. Standing in your own year, you can no more see 1861 or 1901 than the Queen can see you in your dark stairwell. Every era is a corridor. Everyone in it walks by their own small ring of lantern light, servants and sovereigns alike, and the future is simply the part of the corridor the light hasn't reached. But tonight, none of that has happened. Tonight it is still the first year, and everything is still beginning, and down in the dusk 2 riders are coming back up the long walk between the elms, small and far, and the sewing-room reader has reached the shipping news, and Sarah bites a thread, and the fire ticks, and your needle goes in and out, and you are, by every measure your world keeps, exactly where you're supposed to be. Tomorrow there will be grates. Tomorrow there will be the 62 stairs and the ice on the basin. Or not, depending on the season's mood. Tomorrow the scuttle, the tea leaves, the wax and the tallow, the tunnel with its fishy lamps, the whole enormous patient machine taking you up like a small wheel at first light and setting you down worn at midnight. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is a warm room and mended wool and the last grey-gold light on 30 miles of England, and enough. And then, in February of 1841, the wheel comes all the way round, and you notice the date the way you notice a face in a crowd. The 10th. 1 year. The court is not at Windsor. The anniversary is kept in London quietly. A young family now, the small princess 3 months old. But you are in the sitting room anyway, because the sitting room is yours, and the fires are kept laid in the private apartments, whether the family is in residence or not, against sudden arrivals, because that is the standing order, and standing orders outlive their occasions here the way everything does. So it happens that on the first anniversary of the wedding of Victoria and Albert, at 5 o'clock in the winter dusk, you're on your knees on the hearth-cloth of the Queen's sitting-room, laying a fire that no one may ever light, and your hands are doing what they did 1 year ago to the day. Cinders and paper and crosswise pine and the good walls and placed like masonry. And the difference between this year and last year is the whole difference of your life. Last year your hand shook, and today it does not. Last year you raced a carriage through the dark, and today the room is quiet as snow. Last year you were a frightened girl doing the work, and today you are the work, wearing a girl. You finish. You sit back on your heels. The room holds the blue last light in its windows, the piano, the work basket, the china dogs, the writing table where, 1 year ago tonight, minus a few hours, a 20-year-old wrote the happiest sentences of her century by the light of your fire. You say nothing because there is no one to say it to, and because the castle has trained you past the need. But you put one finger, the middle one of the right hand, the one the burn seam crosses, lightly on the cold iron of the grate for exactly a moment, the way you might touch a headstone or a cradle or the shoulder of a friend. A private mark on a private anniversary in a private room made by an invisible hand. That is the whole ceremony. Then you take up your box and go, and the door gives its soft click, and the room keeps everything, the way rooms do. Now the day is truly over. Come up the stairs one last time. 62 steps, wooden then stone. The 14th from the bottom, half an inch short, your shoulder brushing the wall in the dark, and every step is one you've climbed before and will climb again, and the climbing itself has become a kind of rest, the body finishing its own sentence. The attic room is cold, but the cold has become an old acquaintance rather than an enemy. You know its habits. Sarah is already down, breathing slow. The others settle one by one, rustle and sigh and stillness, 8 tired women folding out of the day like letters into envelopes. You lie on your back on the straw and let the aches report in one by one, taking the roll. Shoulders present, knees present, hands present, cracked, greased, closing. Feet distant now, unlacing their complaints. Then you dismiss the parade. The body, given permission, begins to pour itself downward into the mattress the way sand pours, heaviest parts first. Listen. The castle is talking itself to sleep around you. The slates ticking overhead as they give up the last of nothing, because February slates have no heat to give. That ticking is just the cold turning over. A dog somewhere in the town below the walls. The curfew tower bell, counting an hour you do not bother to count. Deep down, 3 floors of stone away, the faint iron mutter of the kitchen banking its fires for the night, red eyes closing under ash. Wind coming off the great park and finding the arrow slits and the chimney mouths. 900 years of stone turning the wind into a low, continuous word with no beginning. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a bed and a wage and a room that is yours by right of work, and a friend breathing beside you, and hands that know a trade, and a place in a machine so vast and old that being small inside it feels, on the good nights, not like being lost but like being kept. That's more than the boy who fired the pistols had. That's more than half the world has tonight. That's enough. The sounds of the castle grow fainter, or maybe you're just listening less. The boundary between waking and sleeping starts to soften, the way it does when the body has been honestly spent, when consciousness has finished its shift and hands over, without ceremony, to whatever keeps the watch below. Somewhere beneath you, the night footman walks his floor with his lantern, checking the low red eyes of the grates. Somewhere the watch is changing on the walls. 2 quiet voices, a password older than anyone's grandfather. Somewhere in London, in another firelit room, a young queen and her husband are ending the first year of a marriage that will be told and retold until the telling wears smooth. And here, under the slates, above the kitchen court, at the top of 62 stairs, a housemaid nobody will remember is falling asleep inside a night that history will remember forever. And of the 2 of you, the knight and the housemaid, you are the one who was actually there. Let that be the last thought. You were there. The hands were yours. You sink. Tomorrow will come soon enough. The bells will pull you up at 5, the same as always, and the basin and the stairs and the grates and the enormous patient wheel of it all. But for now there's just this, the straw settling under you with its small dry voice, the blanket's rough wool at your chin, Sarah's slow breathing keeping its faithful time, the distant heartbeat of a castle that never quite stops. You close your eyes. Centuries will pass. The Windsor you know will change past recognizing. The tallow and the tapers will give way to gas, and the gas to a cold, steady light with no flame in it at all, and Wick's fleet of glass chimneys will end up in cabinets, labelled. The scuttles and the tunnel relays will fall silent. Heat will arrive invisibly, through pipes and wires, and no one's shoulder will sit lower for it. The great fire that every servant of your century feared will finally come, one November far away, and take the state rooms, and men and women will form human chains through the smoke to carry the treasures out, and then they will build it all back, because that is what this building does to people. The queen you serve will fill the age with her name and go at last to lie beside her prince in a tomb in the park you can see from your window, and their children's children's children will walk the grand corridor you swept with tea leaves, and other hands, always other hands, will keep the fires and lay the tables and turn their faces to the wall. But people will still live in that castle, still work in it, still climb narrow stairs at midnight with aching shoulders, still lie down at the end of long days under old roofs, listening to wind in stone, wondering what tomorrow will bring, and too tired at the last to wonder for long. Some things don't change. The tired body doesn't change. The need for warmth doesn't change. The way sleep comes up at the end of an honest day like a tide up a channel, patient, certain, taking the small boats first, that doesn't change. Not in 1,000 years of that hill. Not in you listening now, wherever your own bed is, at the end of your own long day. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Hannah Price in her attic above the kitchen court 186 years ago. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Take it and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.